Welcome to Tea Time, my friends, a place where I muse about my gender transition experience and in the process aim to comfort and inspire others to a greater level of self-awareness. I am Artemis, and first of all, let's be clear, at least for myself and other transgender people that I've talked to, I'm not trying to indoctrinate anybody into becoming transgender. Unlike the absolutely idiotic joke that the San Francisco Gay Men's Choir thought was funny.
You think that we'll corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked? Funny, just this once, you're correct. We'll convert your children. Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it.
I and others like me are not trying to convert your children into the alphabet soup community. You may even say that when Judith Butler wrote about questioning gender, she may have meant it simply to be a playful exploration of potentially philosophical nature, meant to open our minds a bit, and not to intentionally tear down an entire system of scientific understanding. On those grounds, there is no transgender agenda, and I want everyone to live however they want. However, there are radical individuals out there who are absolutely bent on stuffing their agenda down everyone's throats when it comes to all things queer related. And that is absolutely an agenda that we're going to talk about in this video. And of course, why Sun Tzu is important here. So, Sun Tzu was a military strategist and philosopher who lived roughly 2,500 years ago, and whom we credit to have literally written the book on war, called The Art of War. The particular section that we're interested in is the topic of subversion, which is basically defeating your enemy without having to do it the manual brute force way. Since the advent of nuclear weapons, we don't quite see warfare like we used to, and that is crucial to recognize. Our approach has to change, or else we risk turning this rock into glowing green stardust. At this point, alternative war tactics are almost all that's left, when most of the major world players have their hands hovering over the mutually assured destruction button. With what's going on socially, culturally, and politically in the United States at least, we are in the middle of World War III. But it doesn't look like tanks, foxholes, and horrible mustaches. Instead, it's warfare fought completely the way Sun Tzu had imagined it, by using a tactic called subversion. So, a KGB agent who defected from Russian operation back in the 1980s or so, named Yuri Bezmenov, whose speech I'm going to link in the description below, talks about how to use subversion tactics as a form of psychological warfare. And wannabe world dominators have been using these ideas alongside physical weapons since we've been recording history. I stumbled into this much bigger picture when trying to figure out why it seemed so many activists were pushing for more extreme action and recognition with LGBT issues, and doing so in an extremely aggressive manner that seemed disproportionate to the issues at stake. We already had equality at the federal level, and our lives were largely no longer in danger. So what was the reasoning for this explosive behavior? I found my answer in the work of Herbert Marcuse, a prominent radical left-wing philosopher of the mid-20th century. And as a quick note here, I have or will soon have many videos detailing much more about how these philosophers from the Frankfurt School are a large cause for all the cultural upheaval that we are currently seeing today in the United States. So for now, I'm focusing very narrowly on a consequence of a single aspect of their writings. So, in a nutshell, Marcuse was very intent on creating conditions for social revolution that would usher in the rise of communism to achieve their idea of utopia. He was thoroughly disgusted by the fact that capitalism was providing for conditions that actually made people happy, because in his eyes, this happiness was an illusion, and people were still being held captives and zombies to what capitalist elites told them to enjoy. What a lovely flavor of curmudgeonly control freak, right? He then stated in his Essay on Liberation of 1969, something that Sun Tzu and Yuri Bezmenov knew very well, which was that the best strategy to shake up this stasis was to galvanize the minorities, the outcast, those with an axe to grind, and were then told that they're victims, or already believe themselves to be, and use them to create the revolution. Cattle prod, meet bull. Bull, meet China shop. China shop owner, meet insurance company. With a nice fat check for the bullshit you actually caused with your cattle prod. BLM, Antifa, all of you are being used harder than a dull knife owned by Dahmer. And the worst part, once these groups have stopped being useful towards the goal, they'll be ditched faster than New Year's resolutions. And in the wake will be those who were the silent majority in these minority groups who will be looked at by the rest of society as the scapegoats, the reason for all of the horrors that followed. This is why it is so crucial for the emotionally healthy and mature people within these minority groups to speak up, empathize, and educate those around them that the problem here is the unhealthy mentality and the emotional instability of those loud victims within those minority communities, not the communities themselves. And it's hard because people are generally very visual creatures. So it's much easier to see that teal-haired alphabet super railing about being misgendered on TikTok and associate that with all the people within that community, the LGBT community, instead of seeing the flawed mentality as the problem, which is an intangible thing. So the LGBT group proves useful to those wishing to usher in the communist utopia for many reasons. First, communism seeks to level the playing field completely, as in, everyone is equal. The blurring of the boundaries between the sexes is happening with the transgender activists. I do personally believe that it is a worthy exploration of humanity to find the similarities between men and women, and celebrate them just the same as their differences. But I do not believe it's socially smart to say that trans men are men and trans women are women. That is a topic for a whole other video. Secondly, it's very easy to warp language when you have people picking their own pronouns. And warping language to justify your position is a favorite tactic of the narcissistic gaslighting woke. Third, it's easy to justify the feminization of men in a movement that questions the ideas of masculinity and femininity. And anytime you do that, it opens you up to attack from cultures that still have hyper-toxically masculine and physically aggressive men. And before I get yelled at, no, I'm not talking trash about a masculine man learning to be more in touch with the feminine, or calling all men aggressive. I believe that everything needs to be in balance. And right now, the scales are tipping dangerously too far to one side, given the reality in which we live, which is complex to say the least. At this moment, I think there are a few crucial takeaways, no matter who you are. One is that recognizing anytime you allow a victimhood mentality take hold of your mind, you are instantly and more easily able to be controlled, and arguably a less content human being. Two, never assume that what you see is exactly what's going on. And three, read The Art of War. It's equivalent to having a loaded arsenal these days.